Public sector leaders continue to tackle the evolving technological landscape to propel their agencies forward. One area in particular involves how automation, modern data management tools, and cloud services can play a pivotal role in improving agency outcomes. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and joining me to talk about their practical experiences in this area are Manuel Medrano, Office Director of Cybersecurity Monitoring and Operations at the Department of State, and Andrew Davidson, Senior Vice President of Products for MongoDB. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And Manuel, I'd like to start with you. Where do you see opportunities for automating routine tasks, especially around data management and advanced analytics to improve operational efficiency and security outcomes?
Well, Wyatt, thank you. Happy to be here. Data is a buzzword, right? Everybody's talking about data, and for obvious reasons, right? So this is definitely a big focus for us as we look into the future. The amount of IT activity that continues to grow, it's growing and growing at a very fast pace. The complexity of underlying the infrastructure and the way the users access the data continues to add new dynamics. So with that, right, of course, there's an increase in cyber attacks. So my job, right, is to lead the Security Operations Center for State Department. So we do the cyber monitoring, and that is a dynamic nature of our threat techniques. So scaling our defenses demands we embrace the automation of routine tasks. But I also want to emphasize one thing. The human factor, and I'm going to say it again, the human factor will and must remain in the mix. But at the same time, we have to expand our automation, especially when it comes down to utilizing our resources to its maximum. For us, it's all about sorting through the deluge of data logs, tools, and sensors, overlaying available threat intelligence, and prioritizing some of those alerts. It's all about getting the right data in the right hands in a timely manner to drive the right actions. And I'm very happy that the State Department has prioritized a data-driven decision frameworks. And that is part of our bureau. In the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, we're also focusing on that. And this is not just about tools in the hands of SOC analysts, because I know techies, they love their tools, right? But this is about capabilities. So what we have done is we looped in our system owners and others from across the enterprise, and we have deputized them as cyber defenders. They must receive what our automated processes produce, since they have the ability to take concrete and tangible actions to protect their data and systems. We have also increased our automation, and it's a must. That must now be part of a people, process, and technology, because often we focus only on the technology, but we forget about the process, and then we also forget about the people and the upskilling of the people. In order to move forward as an organization into more of that automated environment in a data-driven world, right, with data analytics, there is a lot of gain that any organization can do like us, but you need to focus on the right people, the right process, and the right technology.
Those are some great points. I'd like to follow up on one of them, and that is, where are you seeing opportunities for modern data management tools to enable agile development practices? Again, when we think about security.
So agile is one of my favorite topics, and often a lot of people, they're like, oh, there you go, man, again with agile. But no, it's true, right? Agility, especially in today's world. So I'll take the liberty of flipping that question a little bit for you, right? So in my case, right, it's more about using agile development practices to incrementally deliver solutions that include modern data management tools. And that's what we're working on right now. So State Department, right? I don't have to tell everyone, right? But it is complex. It is a global environment where we are in over 270 locations overseas. And the waterfall approach, right, doesn't allow us to keep up with the pace with our operational challenges. And we have a lot of geopolitical events that are happening. We basically, right, is that it's our job to carry out the president's foreign policy initiatives. So we have to be as agile as we can and react as well. So what we're doing right now, right, is we need to get the solutions to the right hands of the people to make quick decisions as possible. by truly embracing an agile approach. It's more than pumping out a policy memo that says you should do this or updating documentation and development processes. This is a cultural shift. And that is what we're focusing on right now. It is an ongoing process. I'm not going to lie. There are good days and there are bad days because it is changing the culture. We have to reskill, we have to upskill, and sometimes it is taking small little steps with the staff so that they can understand the nature and why it's important to be agile. It is still an ongoing process for improving and redefining our development practices. And in my organizations, we are continuing to take this on and we'll continue to learn, we will continue to refine, and we will continue to improve as well.
Well, Andrew, I'd like to bring you in. Talk to us. I know you work with a number of customers in the public sector. What are you seeing, and where are you seeing opportunities for modern data management tools to enable the broader agile development practice?
I see a lot of synergies with what Manuel was saying. If we think about kind of behind the scenes, what it takes to deliver various forms of automation, and by the way, automation could be examples like what he was referring to, where you're responding to threats in real time or analyzing signals, but there could be many other things in the broader government space, right? You think about agencies that are on many different classes of missions, servicing citizens, servicing defense needs, countless back-end forms of machinery, essentially, that make the government tick and talk and continue to do its thing, all the gears of the government. Well, if you look behind the scenes at what it takes to automate anything therein, you realize we're very much in a software-defined government, but in so many cases, we're sort of in this situation in which people keep investing behind the scenes, but we aren't seeing the progress we're trying to see. And there's actually a relationship with risk mitigation involved in this, which is, if you kind of look at why we're struggling to make the progress we'd like to see, it's often the fact that we're kind of running into the limitations of legacy components on the back end, basically. And when you think about the humans that are empowered to try and build the software of the future for the government, developers, software engineers, architects, and operators, I think the dream state is a world in which you can empower relatively small teams that can almost operate like special ops. They can go in there and really replace core components or augment many different other systems. And oftentimes this is phased. Sometimes you start with a system of engagement that eventually replaces a system of record, for example. But the reason building with modern general purpose building blocks is so important is those building blocks can replace all of the complexity that was associated with managing the sort of combining a million little point solutions together that was the old way of doing things. We now have modern technologies that can be used to power core data use cases in software. The power of the document model, for example, which is certainly something that's very much our bread and butter, allows you to express the rich shape of all the data that is relevant really for any kind of use case. And that, coupled with the superset of workloads behind the scenes, from transactional to search to vector search relevant to the generative AI moment we're seeing, that allows you to consolidate, instead of having large numbers of components, a simpler set of building blocks on the back end of software. And if you have a simpler set of building blocks on the back end of software, you're reducing the developer complexity of interfacing with lots of different APIs. You're reducing the data duplication, the sort of brittle overhead of moving data around, and you're significantly reducing the data governance tax, which slows everything down. So if you can reduce just the number of building blocks and show that those building blocks can empower those special ops teams to build the software of the future for the government, that becomes a really compelling modality of self-service agility for those software teams that are actually being empowered to make a difference, combined with reduced governance overhead. And I think that's kind of the dream. And in many ways, people hoped to unlock that dream when they adopt the cloud, whether in the Gov cloud or more private cloud modalities, along with agile frameworks like Manuel was mentioning. But I think oftentimes we find ourselves doing all the rituals or adopting the platform and still feeling like, I'm still feeling like I now have more surface area to manage and more complexity. And I think what we're taking stock of in the industry now is there actually a way to truly feel like there's a general purpose modern alternative? And I think the answer is yes. The good news is yes. Now, modernizing an enormous amount of legacy environments is a slow, iterative, time-consuming process that all of us are involved in. But the good news is you start seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. You start realizing that those consumer-grade experiences people are conditioned to expect from software are available to the government. And I think the shift into the public cloud and modern technologies like MongoDB and many others make it really realizable for the government today.
Absolutely. Well, Manuel, back to you. Talk to us a little bit about, how modern cloud services are helping enable application modernization to, overcome some of these legacy system challenges that you were alluding to earlier.
Yeah, and like Andrew mentioned, right? So generally speaking, I think there's two approaches to cloud migration, right? So the first one is where you lift, shift, done, right? So that is it's something that we're very familiar with, right? System owners can basically take a legacy system, right, and migrate it to an on-premise infrastructure to the cloud infrastructure, right? So to me, that's not really cloud modernization migration. That's just lifting the same thing and putting it on the other side, right? Now, there are certainly benefits to that approach, but it's not optimal, right? It does not leverage or inherit advantages of the cloud, just like Andrew was saying, right? Then you also have the second approach, which is migrating a service. That's the key, a service to the cloud. And that is changing the system where the appropriate to leverage the cloud, right? Instead of basically like when I say, if you want to then engineer your old legacy system now to make it cloud, that's where we have a problem. Instead of leveraging the cloud services out of the box, like Andrew was saying, right, for the consumer, then that's where you get the best benefit out of it as well. So the migration, right, of on-premise and legacy systems to the cloud-native architectures enables definitely greater scalability, flexibility, and cost efficiency through a lot of serverless computing. Right now, with my organization, we're doing a lot of that work. Because it is faster to spin up a server, it is faster to spin up some of the software development, right? Then instead of going through, as Andrew said, the governance as well. There's a lot of heavy lifting that happens there. And our goal, going back to what agility is, that what can we provide to our customers, in this case, our taxpayers, right? The greatest impact so that they can be able to utilize these capabilities. So as an example, right, we are transitioning from our on-premise data storage to the cloud-based platforms here at the State Department. And I'm doing that with the SOC operations as well, so that we can be more efficient. I can definitely store and process faster. And like Andrew said, I need to analyze large volumes of data faster. And that's where we're trying to leverage a lot of this, so that eventually, right, I can get to those decision-making mission-critical operations as well. Now, I also want to highlight another important thing, and now let's see what Andrew's thoughts are about this. Because as we move more to the cloud, right, and this is specific to considerations for cloud presents to cyber defenders, which is an area that I lead, right? In the early days of cloud migration, it was approached as a way of transferring, right, basically the risk. So there was the assumption that cloud service providers would take care of all the cyber defenses. We know that's no longer the case, right? We have seen a lot of that. So it's important to ensure that contracts are written to hold also the cloud service providers accountable. It is critical to those contracts to also ensure, right, that the providers will pass what you need in terms of log data to share the operational information that you need in a timely and transparent manner. Never assume that the cloud inherently provides all of the protections of the data that you need, right? This is important, right? Because we have seen that threat actors have definitely changed, right? Their tactics, they're definitely shifting to cloud service providers or other providers, right? But at the same time, just like Andrew said, from a business perspective, right, we should leverage the cloud. We should leverage all those services, but then we should also focus on the governance, just like he said. And then also, I agree with him, we also need to start developing what we call like a low code, no code environment, right? Instead of having to custom code a lot of the applications and put them into one system together.
So Andrew, I'm curious how you might respond to that. And again, how you see the big modern cloud services today, not only enabling this modernization over legacy systems, but also taking the right measures to help agencies be secure with it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he phrased it well. You know, the sort of initial phase of cloud adoption was that lift and shift era. And I think as an industry, we've largely moved past that, especially in the private sector. You know, I think in the public sector, we're still developing some of those scars, if you will. But essentially, the problem or challenge with lift and shift as a posture is if you sort of treat cloud as just another data center, then what you do is you end up finding yourself doing everything that you were traditionally doing in your data center. You start dealing with basically provisioning management, networking management, operating system patching management, database and application patching management, distributed systems management, availability concern management, multi-region, global management. And you realize, let alone TLS network encryption management and ensuring authentication and authorization are enabled everywhere. You start realizing that all of those layers are things that basically you have to have experts focusing on, just like you had to in the traditional data center. And each one requires really significant focus, or else it could be misconfigured, opening up a threat vector. And so the dream of cloud services, and some have done a great job of this, some have maybe less so. Like I'll say with MongoDB Atlas, which is our flagship service, we have defaults that can never be disabled. That was an intentional decision from the beginning. Security defaults like TLS network encryption, authentication, encryption at rest everywhere, auditing everywhere, IP access lists, network requirements, private networking everywhere. Those kinds of requirements make it so that when you get one of those small teams that's trying to build software fast, one of those special ops teams, they're not allowed to go take a shortcut by just turning something off the way, frankly, someone could have in theory done in the traditional data center world. It sort of forces the service provider to ensure that these great security capabilities that can't be disabled are still easy to build with. And so I think that's kind of the new world we're in. It's like you must build with all these capabilities, security and depth out of the box. That's never going to be the only solution. We know that there's so many layers that go beyond that, but starting there allows you to kind of move up the level of abstraction. You now look at the broader applications that you're building, the governance around all the access points into the applications, and less about some of that back-end plumbing level detail. So I think we're as an industry, we kind of get that now. But really getting to the point where we truly work through what it means to start trusting a third party, like a cloud provider or a service provider on top of a cloud provider. It's a DNA or culture shift. I mean, we sort of trust ourselves, even if really ourselves in a traditional data center was like armies of people. For decades, that was normal for us. And I think now we're learning to trust a different kind of abstraction provided by a service that fundamentally needs to earn our trust. And I think whether or not it's about the contract, it's also kind of goes deeply into, is that a service provider engaging with you in a way that lets you really understand how they operate? Is the way their operating DNA is set, is that aligned to how you think and feel? And I think, I'll be intellectually honest, totally transparent, and point out that there's so many different, parts of the government that are going to have completely different sets of expectations. I think about the defense and state, for that matter, completely different than civilian, internal U.S. And so having all of the different capabilities for each, with different modalities for each, is certainly important. Where we sit as a database provider, we understand we need to service all of the above. If you want to manage us in an air-gapped data center with our enterprise advanced capability, that's important, and that's on you to go do that. But we want you to have a great offering in the public cloud and in Atlas for Government as well. And we're seeing good validation that both modalities allow us to emerge in the public sector as a general purpose next generation standard for builders to feel like that they're really bringing their careers forward by learning how to build this new way with a document model.
Well, gentlemen, in the time we have left, a final question for you. We've been kind of talking about what, kind of very simplistically can be called the plumbing issues and modernizing it. But I'd love to hear about what challenges are still out there to help agencies and the workforce really derive more valuable insights from all this growing data. So we're not just handling it at scale better and more securely, but we're actually providing net new value. Manuel, tell me what's the State Department trying to do in that regard to, really make data more valuable that it's collecting?
So at the State Department, we have a lot of work right now with the Chief Data Officer, right? So we're working on this cyber data lakehouse approach. And what that means is that we're making sure that we have the data available to every business need within the organization so that then they can perform the operational side of it. So that means that it doesn't matter where the data resides, the data can be accessed. Now, the other side of that is the amount of data that I have to collect now, especially for cyber defense, is growing and growing and growing. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we have. But right now, we are definitely building the analytics and the visualizations on top of that data storage.
And Andrew, just very quickly.
Yeah, I would point out that there's so many layers to put data to use. You know, there's what we think of when we first hear the question, which is like business intelligence solutions and analytics. But I would point out, like Manuel was pointing out, there's upstack software that's going to be built to put the data to use, whether it's for, you know, members of the government to provide better services to citizens, or it's low-code solutions. And when you look at what it takes to build each of those different kinds of services, it's fundamentally about software, and it's about being able to express the many different kinds of queries against your data. And you'd be surprised, doing that is actually tricky while maintaining all the right role-based access control and the governance we were talking about before. The good news is this is the kind of thing that's being done at scale like never before with the new technology that exists.
Well, Manuel Medrano and Andrew Davidson, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your respective perspectives on this whole subject of really using modern data tools to really advance the work of government. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.